Okay, this entire hour we'll take your phone calls with Howard Bloom, author of The Genius of the Beast. Howard will be next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast, George Norrie along with The Genius of the Beast, Howard Bloom. Isn't the book on sale right now, just today?
Yes, it hits the stores in approximately 6 hours.
Excellent.
Today.
You excited about this?
Yes, I am, and the book has been on sale on Amazon for about 10 days now, and it's doing very well. And we'll see. You know, it's always scary bringing out a new book. It's a set of new ideas, and you know, when you ask what my favorite parts are, there are things in there you wouldn't believe. So you never know how people are going to take it.
Was this one different for you?
Well, not really, because I have to fight for almost every one of my books. There are always ideas that seem so bizarre to the publishing world that it is hard to get them across. But there wasn't, you know, George, it's really hard to say. The book has so many things like material miracles, and this is the first time I've really ever been able to get, as ironic as this sounds, in a book that is allegedly about capitalism, it's the first book I've ever been able to get so close to the spiritual dimension with. It's the first book I've ever really been able to dig into the creativity of the cosmos. The cosmos is astonishingly creative, and my colleagues in science don't recognize it. It breaks all the rules that my friends in science think that it follows. It's not a universe that falls down. It's a universe that's constantly falling up. And it does an awful lot of what it's doing these days through us human beings. It was an exciting book to write. It was fun to write.
Good for you. Let's go to some calls here. Let's go to Eatonville, Washington. Walter, you're up with us on Coast to Coast. Hey, Walter, go ahead, sir.
Yes, I was wondering, you were asking what can they invent next? Why don't we invent freedom? I mean, like no property taxes. It seems to me you asked, what happens if you lose your job? Well, you lose your house. Your property taxes are the only thing standing between us and freedom. Now, isn't there several other ways we could get the tax money other than, I mean, if I lose my job, then I have all these ways to get to grow my own food. I can become self-sufficient, create my own energy. But if there's property taxes, that's the end of freedom right there.
Well, there are a whole lot of ideas about alternative monies, ways to put together alternative currency, ways to put together local currency, the kinds of ideas that you're alluding to, the libertarian ideas. And I have to confess, on those things, I'm not an expert at all. I'm more an expert on coming up with the next way to produce a genie in a bottle. I mean, if you're talking about what is the next great thing going to be, we've always dreamed about a genie in a bottle that will do anything that we ask it to exactly when we ask it to do it, that will make our wishes come true. Google is halfway on its way to being there right now. Google right now tries to figure out what it is you want right now and tries to give it to you. Google is reinventing advertising, not to be something that rams itself down your throat, but that finds you when you need it and gives you the information you need when you need it. Now, that's the kind of thing, the wildly imaginative stuff, I have an easy time visualizing. The stuff that's on the alternative energy or alternative currency end of things, the libertarian alteration of structure things, I'm afraid those are my areas of weakness.
All right, let's go to Coast guest, Charles Ostman on the line in Berkeley, California. Hey, Charles, how have you been?
I'm doing just fine, and thanks for having me on just for a few minutes. I really enjoyed meeting you, by the way, in California a few months ago.
Yes, likewise.
A couple of quick things. This is something I've really felt for a long time, and I really give Howard a lot of credit. This is one of the best interviews we've had on the air, and I really mean that. A couple of quick points, if I may. I remember when I was in high school, going back many, many years ago in the Pacific Northwest, many years ago indeed. This was back when Boeing was the central, sort of industry of the town. And it was a big deal. It was a sense of pride. It was the focus of most people's lives to be the next new scientist and the next new engineer. There were a lot of, I remember competing in science fairs. I remember we had a very active chemistry lab in our high school. It was okay to be a nerd. It was a lot of pride. I mean, people really wanted to excel, and there was big emphasis on competition. What I see now is it's all about political correctness and, self-esteem, which is fine, but it's gone way overboard. And I'm a Cal alumni here from UC Berkeley, and just a few blocks from where I live. That's where the campus is. I go there pretty often for various events, and I walk into many classrooms of, chemistry, physics, electrical engineering, that sort of thing. About 80% of the students are from other parts of the world, and, mainly Asia and Eastern Bloc countries, that kind of thing. And these kids are fanatical about wanting to compete. They want to get out there. They want to, make their mark, as it were. I just don't see that in the American culture at the moment. And a couple of quick examples. I work for an institute that does a lot of sort of what you might call industrial analysis of various industries, how it affects economic policy, that kind of thing. And I just finished working on a PowerPoint presentation from one of our other colleagues last week on innovation that was being presented to a collection of folks in India. I remember just a few weeks ago, I went to this Japanese-sponsored event here in the South Bay on the science of creativity. In other words, these folks from other parts of the world, they're getting it. And if we lose our creative edge, which is the one commodity that we've always had, if we lose that, that's the last thing we have. I mean, we can no longer pretend to be the sort of big iron manufacturer of yesteryear, but we do have the inventive spirit, or at least the capability of it. And I think if we lose that, it's done.
Well, I agree with you totally, and I think that what George is doing, having innovators on periodically to give us a sense of how we can lift our heads and move beyond the technologies that we have now, I think that's absolutely terrific. Once upon a time, I was walking around London. It was the 1970s, and one of the things that impressed me was that there were toy stores, and the toy stores had in their windows giant models of steam engines.
Sure.
Obsession with the steam engine,
exactly,
which was the massive breakthrough technology of the 19th century that put England on top of the world for close to 100 years. They hadn't gotten beyond the steam engine. I mean, they were just beginning to get into the Sinclair computer, which was...
I remember those.
Yeah. And their problem was that they were not focusing on the future. They were focusing on the past. And we have to focus on the future. And I think you're absolutely right about the damage that has been done by the sense that we have to give every student a sense of a high self-image, whether he achieves anything or not. Self-image is to be earned. And in Korea, in cross-cultural studies in the 1980s, one of the things that you discovered was the kids in Japan and the kids in Korea and the kids in China had a low self-image. And when you figured it out, you realized why. It's because they don't feel good about themselves till they've achieved something.
Right. And if I could add one last comment, one solution might be, and I just throw it out there as an idea, if we had more like X prizes that could be offered on a much broader basis. In other words, I've seen a little bit of this, and I think we should have a lot more of it. I mean, we've thrown away $1 trillion at trying to keep these banks alive, which is another whole subject. But the idea is for a tiny fraction of that amount of money. If we had X prizes for a whole variety of different things and brought it directly into the classrooms, the high school and college level, and offered serious investment dollars in small increments to folks that invent interesting things, even if only 10% prove to be viable, well, so what? That's the whole point. You want to be able to sort of like nurture a garden, as it were, and see what comes out of the garden. And even if all the fruits aren't exactly perfect, that's how you stimulate this. It's not going to be by keeping old bureaucracies alive and old giant self-serving corporations alive. It's going to be by feeding the fuel that drives people's imagination. And I think this could be brought directly to the average person, as it were, if small amounts of money were articulated out to the different areas and say, look, here's an X prize for new technology, and give it a variety of different categories, and let people compete for these things.
Well, I agree with you absolutely, totally, and completely. And the more we can give people startup money to pursue new ideas, especially new techno ideas and new ideas about human organization. Remember, that what we're talking about when we're talking about reinventing bureaucracy is new ways of organizing humans so that they can accomplish something. I think it's vital. And the Intel prizes are to be cherished. The X Prize is to be cherished. But one thing you learn from the X Prize and from being in the space community, where I've been spending a lot of time over the last 2.5 years, is that once you've invented one X Prize, it is a tremendous motivator, but you don't just want to repeat it. You have to invent something that's equally novel in order to keep people excited. You just can't repeat the same pattern of X Prizes for everything, much as I would love to do that. So if you come up with an idea for the next X Prize that's not an X Prize, it's not a traditional form of competition. I like your idea of doing the equivalent of what the Grameen Bank from Bangladesh does with women all over the world. It gives groups, collectives of 5 women, a small amount of money, maybe $500 to work with. They're all responsible for each other's debts. They all have to pay the money back, and they're all there to pursue some dream, some goal, something that they see in their community that's needed. And if we did the same thing with little groups of 5 kids trying to pursue a new techno dream or a new organizational scheme, or a new product of some kind, it would go a long way because kids need the money to develop their ideas.
Can you push technology too far, Howard? Case in point, Stephen Fawcett flies around the world in a balloon, goes nonstop, solo in a small little plane, and then he dies in a crash in the Sierra Nevadas because of just bad conditions, small little plane. Can you go too far?
No, I think
pushing yourself.
I think it's the opposite. You need people who are willing to risk their lives on things. That's what an adventure is. The word adventure means taking on something that not only makes good storytelling, but makes good storytelling because you defied the odds, because you took huge risks. That's what pioneering means. It means taking huge risks. It's when people are willing to take risks, they're willing to push the envelope, they are willing to die for something bigger than themselves. They know that that something bigger than themselves is the human spirit licking toward the heavens in ways that have never been seen on Earth before, is the cosmos' very creativity come to life in forms that make a supernova look small. When people know that and are willing to give up all on behalf of ideas, that's when we achieve the most. That's why the words, we are doing this not because it is easy, but because it is hard, make sense.
Scott, truck driving in Ohio, you're on with Howard Bloom. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, real honor, gentlemen. Mr. Bloom, it's nice to hear uplifting talk such as yours. I broke my back years ago, and although I can move more than my eyebrows, I really felt an encompass of darkness. My son had been born several months earlier. He just started to crawl, and I got his spirit and his willingness to fail continuously. He didn't want to crawl. He wanted to scoot and stand up and fall down, and I could barely move.
Right.
And if children don't accept, disappointment, they don't know what it is, they just continue to push. And watching him, all of a sudden I realized that nothing was there wasn't anything that was impossible if I just risked everything to get it done. To push hard, to continue to go after it, and realize that I'm going to fail, and it's okay to fail because nothing's done that's really worthwhile unless you're willing to risk and fail like you just stated.
I agree with you 1,000%. How is your back now?
I'm driving a truck for a living and have been for the last 10 years. So
that'll tell you. There he is.
It took 4 surgeries to get me moving again, but, each was a step and each was an experience, and I wouldn't change any of it.
I agree with you. And, in fact, research, I was in bed for 15 years with a serious problem, too. And it was called chronic fatigue syndrome. And 7 years before that, I'd been in bed for 6 months with a back problem like yours that also made me too weak to speak. And one thing that research on people like you and me who've been deprived of a significant part of our lives, who've been disabled in some way, indicates is that people who've been disabled are actually happier with their lives than people who've always been whole, because we know how much we've lost and we know how valuable each little thing that we have is. And there's another aspect to what you're saying, and that is the value of vicarious experience. You got a whole sense of how to go about challenging life through your kid. It encouraged you tremendously. Well, when we landed on the moon, it did the same thing for the entire human race. When Europe first discovered the Americas and first started having voyages of discovery, the great payoff of the voyages of discovery, the material payoff, was huge, but it was nothing compared to the spiritual payoff, because people began to dream of discovery. That's why Daniel Defoe was able to write a phony book about a guy who allegedly had been setting off from on a ship across the Atlantic and had gotten marooned. That was the story of Robinson Crusoe. All kinds of stories were written about discovery. In fact, discovery was imagined in whole new ways and led to the space program eventually.
Upton Sinclair went crazy with discoveries-type stories and books, didn't he?
Right. So when you achieve something new, if you are able to publicize it, if you are really able to get it across to the public, you do for humanity what your baby did for you. You uplift people's sense of what is possible, and you lift their spirit into new virtual realms of possibility that exists in their imagination. But the realm of imagination, the real estate of imagination, if it's lifted properly, can be huge.
Let's go to Skagway, Alaska. Keith, west of the Rockies. Go ahead, Keith.
Hello, my friends. How are you?
Hi, Keith.
We're all is well.
This is your half-Mayan friend. Quite an honor, Mr. Bloom. I'm looking forward to reading your book. I think you're right on target there. Looking up. We need to reinstore our youth self-esteem. And like our mission to the moon, landing on the moon,
Right.
that must have really set some people's minds going,
It was stunning.
We can do that. We can do that. And we're a strong country. We have the technology, and I think, and I know we can do it. And with a positive attitude, things get done.
We need to go to the Mars.
Yeah, we can go to Mars. We can go to asteroids. One asteroid has $1 trillion worth of resources. That's a lot of resources. And, of course, we just discovered that the moon has fuel, not to mention that we can make oxygen from its water for human beings. Going to Mars would be terrific. I don't care where we go as long as we go up. There are so many different places to go, it is ridiculous. You know the energy thing. George, you and I have been through this before. In order to generate huge amounts of terrestrial solar energy, we'd need to paper over a huge part of the Mojave and wipe out entire ecosystems. Put that same amount of solar paneling in space, and you have 5 times as much energy per square inch of territory, and it can be beamed down using technology we've used since 1962 or a slight variation thereof. I don't care where we go up there. Let's just go up there and begin to turn it into human territory the way we began to exploit barren islands like the Easter Island, which have been abandoned by its people way back when. The same way that we humans, 12,000 years ago, we humans trekked to the New World, and we enriched humanity in the process. Then we rediscovered the New World. We enriched humanity in the process despite crimes. And if the crimes involve killing 70 million people, that's criminal and is no way acceptable. But guess what? Asteroids don't have indigenous people that can be crushed or destroyed or given diseases. Asteroids do not have species that you can wipe out. As a matter of fact, if you take ecosystems to an asteroid, those ecosystems will adapt and create new species of kinds we have never imagined before.
Howard, you don't sound like an atheist.
George, it's because I have been, and you know this, obsessed with religion since I was 13 years old. I think it is one of the most important things we have in human life, and I think my atheism gives me an opportunity to look at it from a different point of view.
Well, that's no doubt. I would love to do a whole show with you on that.
Well, it is worthy of a whole show. You know that when I was 13 years old, maybe you don't know this. I don't know if we've ever discussed this before, but when I was 10 years old, I got my religion, which was science. And that religion came from a book that taught me that the first 2 rules of science are rule number 1, the truth at any price, including the price of your life. Rule number 2, look at things right under your nose as if you've never seen them before. And then at the age of 13, when I realized I was an atheist, I realized the greatest truth right under my nose was that my parents believed in God fervently, that every tribe I had ever read about, and by then I'd read a lot of anthropology books, believed in gods and heavens and hells. And if the gods were not up above our heads, and if the gods were not in the earth beneath our feet, and they were not in the air around us, then where were they? They were inside of us. And if my goal in science was the truth at any price, including the price of your life, and look at things right under your nose as if you've never seen them before, my job was to look at the things behind my nose, the gods, and try to find the gods inside. And I've been on that mission since I was 13 years old. That's a long time. That's more than half a century.
It sure is. Stay with us, Howard Bloom. We'll be back in just a moment with final phone calls right here on Coast to Coast AM. In our final hour of the program, Dr. Betty Martini joins us. We talk about the dangers of aspartame. But Howard Bloom is next with the rest of your calls on Coast to Coast AM. Well, this is what we've got in store for you for the rest of the week. Tomorrow's program, Dr. Bruce Goldberg joins us as we look at parallel universes and out-of-body travel. On our Wednesday night show, Tom Horn joins us, Nephilim Stargates. That'll tell you everything you need to know. And on Thanksgiving night for a couple hours, Glynis McCants joins us, the Numbers Lady, along with another guest right here on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. Howard Bloom with us, The Genius of the Beast, a radical revision of capitalism. I would hope some folks on Capitol Hill read your book, Howard.
Me too. This book is seriously there to change the way we think about our entire civilization, and the people who have to articulate visions of this kind are the people in the White House more than anything else. So, yes, I am hoping that this book gets read in Washington, too. But as I said, it doesn't come out until 6 hours from now or something like that. So we'll see what its destiny is.
All right, back to the calls we go. Fort Worth, Texas. First-time caller. Hey, John, how are you?
Good. Really nervous. I actually had a couple of questions because I'm one of those guys who is doing or trying to do what you're talking about. And when I was in engineering school, I'm not now, but all of my teachers said that I belonged in the think tank, but I don't know how to get there. And right now, since I'm not in school and I'm struggling quite a bit because I have no income, trying to figure out like how to get funding to maybe get some of my ideas started and who to talk to.
This is a very good question, and it's a really hard one. Once upon a time, I wanted to get a job in writing because it seemed to me that writing clearly was very important to being a scientist. And I sat down with the New York Times, and I made a list of 100 agencies that had jobs, that advertised jobs in editorial, in writing, and called 99 of them and got 99 turndowns. 98 turndowns. On the 99th call, I got a job. So your best way of proceeding is to look at every organization that's ever done anything that really excites you and write their names down and track them down and keep them on a target list. Put as many of them down as you can. Write a presentation of your work. Show it to a lot of people so that you can get feedback and make sure that it's clear and it zings and it sings. And then start contacting all of the organizations that seem to share things in common with you. It's how I've done a lot of things in life. It takes an awful lot of work. It goes back to the spirit, again, of Thomas Alva Edison's. Those weren't 100 failures. Those were 100 ways of learning that things didn't work so I could find the one way that did. But persistence makes all the difference in the world.
Okay, because the way I was thinking about doing it is just starting my own company and trying to do it from that point of view because, I mean, right now, like I said, I'm struggling pretty good.
Well, I've done that too. I mean, if you're living in your parents' home or someplace that's inexpensive, so that you don't have a lot of a big nut to cover, you can start your own company. But again, starting your own company is going to take exactly the same process. Making a target list of 100 or 200 or 300 places that you think you can sell your work in one way or another, and then methodically covering all of them. When I started my first business, I mean, remember, I was raised to be a scientist. Everybody knew I'd be a college professor when I grew up. Nobody ever taught me how to make a living. And when I realized I wanted to do my field work for 20 years in the corporate world and in the world of entertainment and the myth-making machinery of society, I started out with an art studio with some artists who had been working with me in a magazine that I'd been asked to art direct and edit. And for the first 3 months, I visited 5 people a day, 5 days a week, 25 per week. And at the end of 3 months, I had sold absolutely nothing. By the end of the first year, I'd begun to get a trickle of sales. By the end of the second year, we were beginning to develop a little bit of a momentum. These things take ferocious persistence and pushing yourself even on days when you don't see any reason for living.
Speaking of that, Howard, what popped you out of bed after 14 years?
It's a very good question. We're not exactly sure. I think that one of the drugs that I'm taking, stuff called gabapentin, has had an awful lot to do with it. Another drug called oxytocin, which is of all things a socially oriented drug. It's a drug that you get oxytocin in your system when you are feeling generous towards somebody, if you're a mother, when you're bonding with your baby for the first time. And I take that every day, and I think those two things have made more of the difference than anything else.
Good for you. Next
so
up,
I owe a
Leonard.
great deal to the pharmaceutical industry.
Well, sometimes they do work.
Yep.
You know? East of the Rockies, truck driving in California via XM. Hey, Leonard, go ahead.
How you doing, George?
All is well, thanks.
Pleasure to talk to you, Mr. Bloom.
Hi, Leonard.
How you doing? I have a theory that I've been wrestling in my mind for years now. It's gone.
Leonard? Did we
Leonard?
lose Leonard, George?
I think we did.
Socially oriented.
There he is. I don't know where he is. He's gone. Oh, well. Next up, we go to Chloe in Santa Rosa, California. Hey, Chloe, go ahead.
Hi. Oh, my goodness sake. Very quickly, Kennedy and his moon project. I was on duty in a nursing ward orthopedic rehab. And I tell you, when that news came over the radios and the TV, the lame almost walked. I mean, people on strikers, frames, jolted, and that actually put a damper on the Cold War. It was a very strategic, valuable, beautiful move on Kennedy's part to steer people's direction to the moon instead of on the Cold War. Anyway, you did mention that you want to wake people up with our current situation here.
Right.
And I now teach home economics and life nurturing solutions, things like that. And most of the people I'm getting, I really feel what's slowing them down. They've lost any sense of imagination. Their kids are like locked into computer games, whatever, and there's just no education on the life skills that we had back in the 40s and 50s. And the final thing is the majority of these people are on some form of medication that just reduces their drive. I mean, even they get anxious now or depressed because they lost their job. What do? They go to the doctor, they get on a prescription. And I think that's what we're up against as compared to other times when our economy was out the bottom. I didn't even know what was going on. I was born in 1938, but I just didn't understand any of the things going on. All I know is my mother always made it go right with what she had. And she just said, don't worry, you can always turn it into something valuable.
Well, I think that what you saw in the orthopedic ward, when we announced that we were going to the moon, and I remember when we landed on the moon, I mean, that night was, what were you doing, Chloe, that night?
Oh, my God, I was ironing. I've got goosebumps right now. See, it's that, I mean, wow.
And did you have the television on while you were ironing?
No, I didn't actually, but somebody called me to say, you got to turn it on, you got to turn it on. And I think I just saw a little bit of it. Of course, we had rabbit ears in those days,
right?
And I mean, I almost dropped the iron. I mean, and the whole town was just crazy.
Absolutely, and the same thing was happening on the Lower East Side in New York where I was. All these crazy artists that I was among, they all gathered in a place called the Electric Circus because the Electric Circus had something nobody had ever seen before. It had 8-foot-high television screens.
Hey, and I'll tell you another thing. You touched on something, a spiritual atheist. I'm from that category, too, because I did a stint with a brain surgeon or neurosurgery when I was a student.
Wow, Chloe.
And I saw the open brain.
Wow.
Okay? And it was to remove a clot.
Right.
And it was a very simple procedure, and it's like, my God. And I thought, I'm looking at God. That was my thought. And the words came out of my mouth, and the neurosurgeon said, no, this is nothing but I think he used the term, it's like a mechanical rattle-trap sort of switch brain.
Right.
And it's a neural shock absorber. It's just part of the nervous system. It's got a stamina cord and everything. And he said, can you get that, tell that brain to think a thought. And I thought he was crazy. He said, no, go. And I did. I said, okay, think a thought. Nothing happened. He says, tell the fingers think a thought. And he says, you're you, whatever you are. And from that moment on, I knew that my happiness or my joy, like right now, just when you asked me that question, where were you? I mean, I still have these goosebumps, and I feel elated. Now, that emotion is created by me, so I guess I will call myself God, period.
Well, one of the most important things in science is you can measure a person's intelligence by how much he knows he doesn't know. And when you get somebody who thinks he knows everything, whether it's in science or any other field in life, you've truly found an ignorant human being. It's when you see just how astonishing and stunning the mystery of this 3-pound object that sits there in the skull with no eyes and ears of its own, that cannot hear you when you say think a thought, and how it manages to conceive infinity and God and the cosmos and the Big Bang and the whole thing, how it manages over the course of 2.5 million years to create a human culture. It is stunning. And if you cease to be stunned, and if you lose your quality of wonder, and if you lose your curiosity, you're losing not just what makes you a human being, but what makes you a scientist.
All right, next. Go ahead, Howard.
Well, one of the reasons that, George, you know my Michael Jackson obsession. One of the reasons that Michael represented to me such important things, aside from that incredible empathy he had for his audience, was his quality of wonder. And wonder is scientific rule number 2. Rule number 1, the truth at any price, including the price of your life. Rule number 2, look at things right under your nose as if you've never seen them before. Michael looked at the most common things and saw infinities, and it was astonishing to be with him participating in that experience.
First-time caller, we've got Richard in Idaho Falls, Idaho. Richard, go ahead.
Hey, George. Hi, Howard. I'm from Hollywood, California, and I worked for the motion picture industry for about 15 years and injured my back, and I don't know how I ended up in Idaho Falls. But anyways, I've been exposed to working for the extremely rich. I mean, the person that makes $3 million a day. I don't want to mention his name. He passed away since. But then from there, I worked through the government projects where people are just having their hands out and, just that having the have-nots. But, within all that time span, how somebody came out with a paper clip and just that wild invention that comes out of that mind-boggling idea.
Right.
Well, I came out with an idea to save, when you flush water, you just flush the whole tank.
Right.
I made a prototype how to save just enough.
Like a little reservoir, huh?
Correct. And it's so simplified, but yet, I'm just so afraid to put it out in the market because the thought of, the idea.
Well, you can't, Richard. You can't be afraid. He's got to be able. If he's afraid it's going to get stolen, Howard, he'll never get it out anyway.
Yep, absolutely true. Apparently, that is a very difficult environment because patents do get stolen, and there are problems. But again, as George just said, look, when you come out with a book title, somebody could steal that. When you come up with an idea, somebody could steal that. You put it out anyway. One of the things that this may sound like it's really off base, but one of the things that the music industry discovered, in 1922, there were 600 radio stations licensed. The music business made its money by selling sheet music to people and selling recordings. And people were afraid in the music industry that the radio business, giving away music for free, was going to kill the music business.
It saved it.
It saved the music business. So you have to really get stuff out there one way or the other. And if you have one idea, begin to develop other ideas as well. If your first idea, this sounds terrible, but if your first idea is stolen, it will teach you lessons about how to handle the next idea.
They said the same thing, Howard, about VHS. They said it was going to kill the movie industry, and it enhanced it.
Right. So the real trick is to get out there, and your first idea may not sell, but if you try to sell your first 3 ideas, by your 4th idea, you'll be getting somewhere.
We go now to Reno, Nevada. John, west of the Rockies. Go ahead, John. Hi, John.
Yeah, hello. Nice to speak to you guys, George and Howard.
Sure.
You just basically touched on what I wanted to discuss, but it very rarely is it ever discussed. This country is responsible for basically innovating most things that you see in the world today, but it seems like the trillions of dollars end up in other countries. We don't protect our proprietary information. Even if we do, somehow it gets stolen by insider spies and ends up going to somewhere else.
Well, there's a trick here, and that is England was in the same situation in the 1880s and 1890s. England had developed steel, but it didn't bother to develop it. So it was developed in America, and it was developed in Germany, and Germany and England and America made fortunes off of it. England had developed electricity, but England didn't capitalize on it. It didn't develop the products that electricity made possible. So America took over, and Germany, especially with Siemens, took over, and it made England, by the time of World War I, a power that was already slipping from number 1 to number 2. It made these 2 countries of primitive barbarians, Germany and America, countries that were already slipping toward number 1. We have to take our products, and we have to develop them, and we also have to develop new manufacturing techniques. Toyota developed a whole new manufacturing technique. It did it using American ideas for a guy named Deming, but it developed just-on-time delivery of parts, and it developed continuous improvement, where you do that management by walking around that I was talking about and getting the ideas from the 35,000 guys who all have beefs about their job, who all know that their job could be performed better, and it improves based on that. Now, we need to develop the next thing beyond continuous improvement. We need to be we need to be researching and developing the products that come from our research and our ideas and marketing them, but we also need to be researching and developing the very means by which we make them. Now, we did. If that sounds impossible, we did it. In the 19th century, we developed an entirely new industrial way of going about things. It was called the system of interchangeable parts, and by the time it took us 35 years to develop it. In government facilities, we developed it. In armories around the country. By the time we showed it off at 1851 at the great exhibition at the Crystal Palace in England, it was called the American system. And 50 years later, it resulted in the assembly line of Henry Ford. We need to be thinking not just about the new inventions of the future, but the new ways to make them.
What's the first thing you would do to try to fix this, Howard?
Well, one thing is I would try to put an emphasis on, the first thing is vision, George. The first thing is getting our president to make us look up, not constantly looking down. Carbon sequestration may be necessary, but it focuses our minds on holes in the ground. And we have to get away from focusing only on holes in the ground. The second thing is to get us to see that our expanses, our potential, our horizons are unlimited. If our imagination is unlimited, then the president is doing some of the right things. He's encouraging math and science in schools. He's encouraging innovation. He's just not getting headlines for it. But I'd also encourage innovation in the area of production and the ways we go about. What do we do in offices? We assemble information so we can make decisions. So we need to have a heavy emphasis on developing new ways, taking advantage of what we got to streamline gathering information and making decisions.
Howard Bloom, thank you so much. The genius of the beast. When I come right back, Dr. Betty Martini joins us as we talk a little bit about aspartame and the H1N1. We'll be back.